Thank you for joining us for another edition of Behind the Editor's Curtain with Don Corrigan. Each edition focuses on points of interest relating to the environment and the community. And now, here's Don.
Well, we're talking today with Jill Moon, and we're talking about Asian carp. And Jill Moon has a lot of background on this. She's a reporter and editor with the Alton Telegraph. She's done stories, and she's also had some experience at a seminar about Asian carp. So, Jill Moon, good to talk to you today. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity.
What are Asian carp, and how did they get to America?
They are a species of fish, obviously. There's about 3 or 4 subspecies. Silverfin and one other one that are particularly invasive here in the Midwest waterways, and they came about in the 70s. An Arkansas farmer had imported them to clean algae bloom in his catfish ponds. And at some point, eventually, with flooding, I believe, they entered the general waterways. They're in the Mississippi, the Ohio, the Illinois, the Missouri rivers.
So they're like an invasive. A lot of people think of invasives as like plants that come in, but they're a fish. Yeah. They're a fish that's an invasive.
Correct, yes. And they eat the food of native fish and multiply rapidly.
So a lot of the media reports about them are actually kind of funny. I know on TV they show them like jumping out at like rowers at Creve Coeur Lake, or there's stories on the web about how they have frightened boaters and they've knocked teeth out because why do they jump up in the air and cause all this mayhem for people that are on the rivers or fishing on a lake somewhere?
That is a protective reaction. They're very sensitive to electronic waves, like coming from motorboats, and john boats, fishing boats. So it's an impulse for them to jump in reaction to feeling that, and it's a flight or fight type of reaction. Mm-hmm. And they're not even consciously trying to jump.
But that's really not even the most serious problem that they pose, although I guess they do pose a problem for boaters. But yeah. Why are they an environmental issue? Why are the people in the Great Lakes so afraid of Asian carp entering their waterways?
Well, they, as you said, they're not like northern carp that are native here that are bottom feeders. These Asian carp live on algae and plant and plankton life, which is the native fish food source. Catfish, those are more bottom feeders, but that's the major food source for native fish, and they eat it all. Mm-hmm. And they grow so quickly.
They're fruitful and they multiply.
Yeah.
I've heard that in the Illinois River, up to 60 to 80% of the biomass is now Asian carp that they've just taken over.
Yes, it's at least 80%. And the Great Lakes folks, the IDNR that's based in Chicago, or the Army Corps of Engineers, are particularly worried about them getting into the Great Lakes and destroying their $7 billion sport fishing industry.
Mm-hmm. So they are an economic threat and an environmental threat.
Yes, they are.
Well, as a reporter, how many stories have you done, and what kinds of stories have you heard from fishermen and people that are in the Alton, Grafton area since you report for the Alton Telegraph?
Grafton is at the confluence of Illinois and Mississippi rivers, and they're particularly concentrated there, these Asian carp. So it's been a point of worldwide interest from fish product producers in Asia. And I've done, 100
Well, you actually went on some kind of a seminar and learned about them in depth, didn't you?
An Asian Carp Fellowship with the Institutes of Journalism and Environmental Issues.
And what did you learn? What are some of the most salient points you learned about Asian carp when you were on that seminar?
Well, I guess understanding that they are vegetarian fish. They're not eating other fish, which is a common myth, or just misunderstanding.
So I can't catch them with minnows as a bait.
No, they have to be caught with net.
Yeah, I've heard that they're really not a good fisherman kind of fish, that you can't really fish for them because they don't really...
It's not a sport fish.
Yeah.
And they do jump. So they've made these funny reality shows and different contests where people actually shoot the fish as they jump up, that sort of thing. But they are so many that even fishing them, however you get rid of them, is not going to be enough.
So are the local fishermen in your area, are they upset about them, or do they like going out with a bow and shoot?
No, they are upset about them, and that's why they're trying to get rid of them, and which is why I started doing the stories, because local businessmen had come up with a plan to try to diminish the presence of those fish in Illinois in particular.
So what's the plan, and how's it coming together?
American Heartland Fish Products tried their plan, which was catching, massive quantities, employing fishermen to catch them in the nets and make fish products out of the bodies of the fish, whole bodies. And those would have been fish oil and bone meal.
So if I go to Walmart and get my fish oil pills,
yeah,
I could be ingesting Asian carp oil.
You could be, yes. Now this did not work in Grafton for one particular reason, and that was because of a smell that was produced by this process that they used, which is patented process and is used in
Well, they're kind of slimy
Alabama.
And smelly, aren't they?
Yeah, and there was no smell when this is done with catfish offal, OFFAL, which is a waste product of animals, and because they only use the tails, the head, and basic body, outer skin. But the Asian carp, it was being done with the entire body, and they can be bloody fish because they're so big.
Mm-hmm.
And
I've heard they can grow up to 100 pounds.
Yes.
Have you seen Asian carp that big in the rivers up there?
Probably, because they're not necessarily long, but they're thick. They're very thick and long. I've eaten Asian carp many times, and it is a very good fish. It's white and mild, firm. It's really, really tasty, actually.
Really, because most people say the problem is we can't get Americans to eat them because Americans are afraid of them and they don't like them from a taste bud standpoint. So you think they're actually pretty good?
Yes, and I believe mostly it's because Americans haven't eaten it, really, because it is truly a mild fish. It doesn't taste fishy.
Okay. And they're associated with carp, and I think people think they're bottom feeders. I don't want to eat something that's been nibbling on old tires and oil on the bottom of the river, I guess.
Exactly. It's a perception thing, because that's why Asian proprietors are coming here trying to figure out how to ship these fish, because the rivers are so polluted there that they only produce Asian carp in farms like we do our, catfish. But there is a difference between the taste of a pond-raised Asian carp and a wild-caught Asian carp.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've heard that the Chinese are interested in coming and actually harvesting them en masse and filleting them and then flash freezing them and flying them back to China because they're looked upon as kind of a delicacy there.
Yes, and that's what they're actually doing in the space that previously housed the American Heartland Fish Products. A Chinese company has come, and they are flash freezing the entire body of the fish into, very hard, like brick-like state, and they are employing local fishermen to catch these. And this doesn't produce any smell. There's no heat process involved, so no complaints out of, Grafton residents that had dealt, with that smell. The other process.
So this sounds like a serious environmental issue that can cost us millions of dollars when it comes to sport fishing and when it comes to taking over our rivers and lakes. But it also sounds like a sustainability issue if they can figure out how to harvest them and use them in a sustainable way.
Correct, absolutely. And it would produce jobs, here, and export to China in particular, but Asia all over, Indonesia, Malaysia. I mean, this is a fish that is very desired everywhere except the United States, and it's because of the perception that it is a muddy, gross type of a species.
Mm-hmm. So your fish. So the fish stands that line highway. I guess is that Highway 3, the Great River Road that goes along there. So if they started introducing Asian carp sandwiches, do you think they could get Americans past the concern that these are not good eating fish?
If they change the name, which has been tried, Chef Philippe Parola started this about 10 years ago out of Louisiana.
Is he the one that wants them to be called silverfin? He wants them to be called silverfin. So.
And because, like with the Chilean sea bass, it was really called a monkfish at first, and people didn't like the name of that or the sound of it, and now it's Chilean sea bass, which is considered a really nice fish to order at fancy restaurants, etc. So that's the problem. It's a marketing problem, and they're still working on that. And they can be bony, but I've also witnessed Chef Parola deboning these Asian carp, and the bones are long and thin, and they come out quite easily.
So are you going to have some silverfin stuffing with your turkey over the holidays?
I don't think so. I've had Asian carp fish head soup with a contingent of Asian, business people that came, and that wasn't one of my favorites.
Yeah, I would guess not. That doesn't sound very
delicious.
delightful.
Filleted and grilled or made into cakes, similar to crab cakes, which it actually tasted quite similar when Chef Parola made those.
Well, I know you're a book writer. I know you've written for Arcadia Books, but why don't you do a recipe book on Asian carp?
I think I would have to leave. I would have to collaborate with the chef on that, Chef Parola. But also, I think it's worth mentioning that the American Heartland Fish Products, they're still looking at some sites in southern Illinois, like somewhat away from, residential areas. It's the only such operation in the world. The only reason it's not in Grafton is because the folks were living too close, complained about the smell, so they passed a nuisance ordinance to not have it in Grafton Hills near a residential subdivision.
So they're looking for a new location, but there are no locations near Alton or Grafton that would...
No, but they are going to stay in southern Illinois. So add to
I guess that's good news for the people in Chester and Cape Girardeau.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're strictly looking at a more, industrial area.
Yeah.
And they did actually they got the smell where it really wasn't that bad, but people were already, over it.
So can this happen fast enough to save the rivers and to save the Great Lakes? Can this happen fast enough? It sounds like they've already taken over pretty well in the Illinois River.
Yeah, and the Chicago Shipping Canal is electrified to deter the fish from getting to the Great Lakes through the shipping canal, the Chicago Shipping Canal, and they have not found any actual fish in the Great Lakes. They have detected some DNA, but that could be carried on through another fish, or there's different minor ways that could be accounted for, but no actual fish have been found last I've read.
So we got to wrap things up here, but I got to ask you a question. Since you've gone to seminars and you've written about this, where will we be in 5 years on the Asian carp crisis?
I'm afraid that they will, I think, personally get into the Great Lakes eventually, at some point. It's like natural evolution, and it took years for them to get to this point. So that's a positive. They escaped the ponds, the farmers' ponds in the 70s, and they're just, now it's at this tipping point. So it really did take a very long time. It didn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
I don't believe, that all the native fish will be gone in 5 years at all. But I do believe that at some point they're going to get where they want to go.
Yeah. And I guess we're the only natural predators they have, so we need to kick into action if we're going to address the problem.
Yes. The Chinese business that's in Grafton is helping. They've gotten thousands of pounds out of that initial site there. It's helping, but it's not enough, and the studies are taking too long for the Corps because there's so much red tape and bureaucratic shenanigans.
Well, I hope that the Alton Telegraph sponsors an Asian carp fish stand at the 4th of July event you have every year in Alton, and I hope you're there selling this fish for us, because I want to go up and try one.
Yeah, maybe we can get Chef Parola to come back and visit, and he'd be happy to do it.
Yeah, now he has a website too on how he's trying to create recipes for Asian carp, doesn't he?
Yes, and it's worth looking at. And really, he was the impetus for the Grafton businessmen to even think about this problem, and it really started with him. I have to give him credit for that, definitely.
Well, I appreciate your time today speaking to Environmental Echo about the Asian carp issue, and happy writing on this issue in the future. Do you think you'll be doing many stories on this in coming years for the Alton Telegraph?
Because as soon as American Heartland Fish Products finds a site, it's my beat.
All right.
So I definitely will be writing more on this issue.
Well, thanks very much, Jill. And I really appreciate your time talking about Asian carp.
Yes, thank you so much.
This is Don Corrigan for Environmental Echo. Have a good green day, folks.